Hello and welcome back. This will be our 16th webcast in our series, and this is the first one that we're doing which will be pre-recorded. I hope it doesn't lose some of the charm of the previous live webcasts. I still intend to record it all in one take, just as if I was streaming it live, but at least now if there are some technical issues, I can just edit them out. So this week's webcast is the secrets of the betting pyramid, and where I'm going to explore how to balance your betting action both for profitability and for longevity. We won't have a Q&A time during this webcast, but instead we're going to make use of the comments section below. So for the next week, I'll respond to any and all questions that are listed in the comments section for this video. Honestly, I will probably respond to any and all comments and questions for much longer than a week when it comes to this video, but I just wanted to have a place where people knew where to ask a question. The best place to do it is to ask a question on the latest webcast. So, if you like these videos, the best thing you can do is give it a thumbs up down below. This encourages YouTube to present the content to other people, and also if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. That encourages me to help continue putting out content like this. So, as I said, today's topic is the secrets of the betting pyramid. And you're probably a little curious as to what this is all about. Well, does everyone remember that about 25, 30 years ago, they came out with this thing called the food pyramid? It looked something like this. And what they said here is that you could eat all the breads and grains that you want, up to about 40% of your diet, and then fruits and vegetables for about 35% of your diet, meat, fish, and dairy products 20%, sugar, sweets, fats, oils, whatever, 5% of your diet. And this was their idea of a healthy food pyramid. And I've always felt there is some sort of correlation here to sports betting. In sports betting, we have all different types of wagers. We have wagering on major sports, and then minor sports, international sports. We have sides and totals, but then we also have derivatives, where you're betting on a segment of the game or just a certain aspect of the game. And we have prop wagers, which are on, maybe player performance or team performance. And then, of course, there's, things like promos, where maybe the book lets the customer get the best of it in hopes of buying their loyalty. And so while we have this healthy food pyramid, what if we were to construct a healthy sports betting account pyramid to take a better approach for maintaining and growing sports betting accounts? What would a healthy betting account pyramid look like? Well, here's what I think a sportsbook operator would tell you what a healthy account pyramid looks like. As you can see here, 40% of the action would be on major sports like the NFL, NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, college football, and then of course March Madness kind of thrown in there at that tier as well. 35% of the action would be maybe on lesser sports that attract a decent handle, but maybe have a higher historical hold percentage. Things like the PGA, NASCAR, UFC. I put regular season college basketball in there as well. And then 20% would be on the minor sports. And in this slide, I used just some examples like the KHL, Mexican baseball, the WNBA. But we've seen from this pandemic that there are a wide world of minor sports out there that a lot of us didn't even know existed. And you can bet on them. And so when I'm talking about some of these minor sports, that could include table tennis or darts or, Belarusian hockey and things like that. And then, of course, also in this tier, I also put, it's listed here as derivs, but that's short for derivatives. And these could be derivatives on major sports, lesser sports, anything where a derivative market exists. And then at the top of the pyramid, the very peak of the pyramid, and also the smallest section, is props and promos. Now, most sports books, if you gave them this level of balanced action, would let you exist for a pretty long while. Keep in mind these ratios are both the number of wagers as well as the amount wagered. It's not going to fly if you give a book 5 $50 wagers on the NFL each week and then try to follow that up with five $500 player props. That just doesn't work out too well. And the major problem with this pyramid approach is also one of the major problems with the original food pyramid, and in that it's just not that easy to maintain these ratios. Sportsbooks are constantly throwing promos and props in your face or offering hundreds of derivatives on each and every game. And in that same way, it's far easier to find junk food to eat than it is to find healthy food to eat, right? So, I've talked before about finding the low-hanging fruit in sports betting. Some of you may recall the money tree example I gave in a previous webcast. And this was from the 5 ways you can build a bankroll, build a better bankroll, rather. If you haven't seen that webcast, I'll put a link to it above in this video, and then there'll also be a link at the end of this webcast if you want to check that one out. But basically, it went sort of like this. Sports betting is a money tree, and you're here, and you're trying to handicap NFL sides, but NFL sides may exist up here in the money tree. And it'd be far easier for you to try to get the lower hanging fruit. And in the case of the NFL, that might be NFL props, or maybe slightly higher in the tree for you to attain could be NFL second half totals. That's just an example of a derivative market. But the point with this money tree example was that you shouldn't try to go pick the fruit from the top of the tree. You should try to pick the fruit that's more attainable. And that's a better way to approach sports betting. The problem with this healthy account pyramid is it's really only a healthy account for the sportsbook operator, not so much for the bettor. And here's why this healthy account pyramid is so hard to profit from. If you are among the best of the best in terms of winning at sports betting at each of these tiers, here's what your edge percentage would look like. As you can see here, in major sports, maybe you'd be able to squeeze out a 2 to 4% sustainable long-term edge. And I'm not saying across all sports, I'm saying at the sports you're focusing on. And then in lesser sports, the best can usually sustain a 5 to 7% edge, which is good. In minor sports and derivatives, really strong bettors can grind out a nice 6 to 10% edge. But of course, it's harder to get that action down. And then at the top there, props and promos, well, it doesn't take a lot of hard work to find yourself with a 10 to 20% edge over the house when it comes to playing props and promos. So that being the case, if this was the healthy account pyramid and these were the earn rates for each of those tiers, then what you'd really want is a betting pyramid that looks more like this. And I call this the wealthy account pyramid. Now, on this one, 40% of your action is on props and promos and derivatives and minor sports. I threw in college basketball in there, but I know that if given the chance, you'd be loading up on totals in the Battle of Atlantis tournament rather than betting on money lines in mid-majors in late January. Meanwhile, 35% of your action might be on sports with softer lines, the WNBA, more college basketball, maybe some UFC, maybe some college football, but we're not talking FBS, we're talking FCS or even Division III or whatever, some of the lower leagues. And then 20% of your action might be on those tougher markets like the NHL or golf or NASCAR. And then occasionally maybe you toss them some sides and totals on the 3 remaining major sports, but that only accounts for 5% of your action, and it's not really a priority in your mind. Trust me, if you could get away with this in your sportsbook account, you'd be well on your way to making a strong living from sports betting. This is also what a lot of sportsbooks assume you'd do if given the chance. And for a lot of them, their solution is to limit you on whatever bet you try to make, no matter what tier of this or any pyramid it comes from. And as displayed by that previous slide on the win percentage, the win rates for various sports, they really have nothing to worry about when it comes to the major sports, but they do worry about it. And it's sort of a foolish thing that they do. I mean, yes, the props and the promos are definitely beatable. Everybody knows that. But then to limit you on NFL sides or Major League Baseball run lines, that just will never make any sense to me. So what's the solution here then? Well, the ideal approach would be able to balance your sports betting action and still put yourself in a position to win at a higher rate. And so we've had the healthy pyramid and we've had the wealthy pyramid. So in order to steal a line from Benjamin Franklin here, we're going to have the wise pyramid, healthy, wealthy, and wise. So in the wise pyramid, there's many of the same concepts as the previous pyramids, but there's one powerful mystical beam of light going down the center of the pyramid, or at least as good as my Photoshop skills would allow me to make. But that's what that white bar is down the center of the pyramid. What we're doing here is we're establishing what I like to call base bets. And these are the basis which tells the sportsbook operator that you're here to gamble on all facets of your favorite sport or sports. You'll be making 40% of your action on sides and totals, and then 35%, up to 35% of your action on the supporting derivatives of your base bets. However, it's not like you want the base bets telling a narrative that the derivative bets don't support. So you need to have them sort of be in line with each other. You want to be stacking derivative bets on top of your supporting base bets as you build your pyramid. So from there, you can build prop bets on top of that. Now, in a sport like the NFL, 20% of your action on props is acceptable if there's already 40% of your action maybe on base bets or maybe up to 30% on NFL derivatives. But if you're just attacking NFL player props alone, that method probably won't fly. But with the base bets behind it, it builds the pyramid. So in other sports, 5 to 10% of your action being on props backed up by your base bets will generally be what's acceptable. You'll notice that there's no promos in this pyramid. Well, unfortunately, for a serious bettor, promos are a trap. Remember, the goal of promos is to win over your loyalty, and if you're making a lot of other bets, well, they've already got your loyalty. They don't want your action on promos anymore. If you want to sneak one in every now and then, go for it, but you shouldn't be hunting for promos once you're using this approach. Now, elsewhere on this pyramid, we are establishing some base bets on things like college basketball and MMA type events as well. And if you want to build derivatives and props on top of those, feel free, but also be careful because those are generally lower liquidity markets. I would tread lightly, maybe skip a tier when it comes to the percentage amounts and just give those derivatives maybe just 20%. Now, in that middle tier, that 35% tier, we also have major events. So these are events where you can bet a lot of money because they're just so popular. And things like March Madness, things like major golf tournaments. And a lot of these events typically have a high amount of derivatives and props as well. So if you're going to get interested in these events, go ahead and look for derivatives and props because you can stack them on top of your base bets to kind of build the pyramid showing that you're just a really big fan of these events and this is how you're going to go ahead and bet them. Because again, what we're doing with this pyramid is we're building a narrative for the sportsbook to believe. Now, they see a healthy amount of low-risk action on major sports, and then they see a decent amount of mid-risk action on derivatives in that same sport, and then they see some occasional action on higher risk things like props. But a good book looks at that big picture and basically says, oh, well, this guy's here to gamble on all the things that he's a big fan of, and he's just spreading his action around. Betting this way also gives you some leeway to then place some other bets on maybe some minor sports like the WNBA or Mexican baseball and the like. The decent thing with those sports is if you bet their U.S. major component, like bet the NBA and then bet the WNBA, that looks more believable than if you're some kind of NHL specialist and all of a sudden you're betting the WNBA. Same with Mexican baseball if you're betting American baseball. So now the best way to accomplish all of this without getting too beat up by your base bets and winning maybe just your smaller bets and then losing all of your base bets is to look for a correlation in your narrative. And we're going to run through a couple brief examples of what correlation in your narrative might look like. So, in this table here, we have a prop, and we have a corresponding derivative, and then we have a corresponding base bet. And you can read this from right to left, left to right. But basically, if you have this prop in mind, let's say you have a quarterback or wide receiver over in yardage or attempts or completions, a good derivative there might be a second half over, because when is a team throwing more? Well, they're throwing more if they're behind, because it's more efficient use of the clock in football. And when are they usually behind? Well, they might be behind in the second half. And a corresponding base bet might be to bet the opponent money line, because if they're behind, then the opponent is winning. These are sort of things that any decent sports bettor can kind of think through in their head and kind of take the logical steps of how a game could play out to each scenario. Similarly, if you have a running back over, then the team might be using the running back more, which means they might be running out the clock. Again, a more efficient use of the clock when you're ahead is to run the ball more. And so then maybe fourth quarter team total under when you have the lead and you're just trying to run down the clock. And then a base bet there might be the game total under, because more running leads to clock running more, which leads to less scoring. Switching over to baseball, suppose you had a pitcher and you're going to bet his strikeouts over. Well, if he's going to get a lot of strikeouts, he's going to be in the game through at least 5 innings, and he's not going to have a lot of base runners advancing around the bases against him. And so first 5 innings money line on that pitcher's team would be a good derivative bet. And then, of course, a good base bet would be to take the team maybe in a run line situation, since he'll be a major factor of the game. All three of those kind of correlate together. And then lastly, I threw in an NBA prop here. Suppose you wanted a team with 3 points made, and you like the under on it. Well, that means the team, if they're making less 3-pointers, they're shooting less 3-pointers, which means they might not need the 3-pointer as much, which means they might not be trailing. So, you could take the first half team total under, and in that situation, you're saying, well, the team didn't shoot a lot of 3-pointers in the first half. Maybe they scored a few less points. And if they don't have the lead, maybe you can work on the second half to kind of, hedge against your bet if they're going to be taking more 3-pointers. But if they do have the lead, well, then maybe, it lines up better for your prop. And then, of course, the base bet might be taking the team on the money line. Those two bets, the derivative and the base bet there, don't fully correlate as much, but they're also a good way to kind of hedge your situation a little. And so that, if you lose one, you don't lose all 3 automatically, and kind of hedge your situation. But the way you approach this is you don't really need to approach it in sort of a hedging way. You're doing this to kind of build a narrative that you support, this team, and you have a good idea of how this team is going to play on this given night. So a question you might have there is, do I need to bet the base bet first? Well, technically no, but it definitely helps the narrative if you do. Of course, any aspiring sharp bettor would recognize that the likelihood of finding the best number for your base bet and your derivative bet and your prop bet at the same single book is highly unlikely. You may need to factor that in. Keep in mind that you want to kind of keep in mind with these bets which one is the most important to you when you're betting it. Which one has the highest value to you, and make sure that you can get decent value without giving up too much by making the other 2 wagers. If you're betting them at a slightly worse price than might be, available elsewhere in the market. Now, this isn't always the easiest gambit to pull off. Building a narrative like this is worth a try, though. As with other things in sports betting, much of winning sports betting is nuanced. It's the art of sports betting that I kind of always refer to, the science and the art. This is an art topic for a change. And finding the approach that kind of works best for you with all the factors involved is going to take a little bit of trial and error to find out, how it best works. And there's no real formula behind it other than trying to build that narrative, build that pyramid to kind of set yourself up for the best possible scenario. So, in summary, we've taken the food pyramid concept and we've attempted to apply it to betting, and we've come up with a more sustainable betting pattern for longevity at sportsbooks. We started with the healthy account pyramid, and then we moved to the wealthy account pyramid, and finally to the wise pyramid, which makes the bets based on some sort of believable narrative to help sustain accounts, healthy, wealthy, and wise. So, as a reminder, the Q&A portion of this week's webcast will be held in the comments section below. And to kick things off, if you have an idea of a better way to improve this betting pyramid concept, I'd love to hear about it. Leave a comment below and detail, how you think you might be able to improve on it, or what are some of the pitfalls of what I just kind of laid out, that make it, maybe not as good as I think it is. If you have a question maybe on how props work or how derivatives work, we can get into that as well. And lastly, if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up so other people know that it's quality content, and consider subscribing to this channel so that you can see the new content whenever it gets posted. So I will be back next week, and we'll have another pre-recorded episode, and I hope you'll be tuning in. So I will see you next time.